Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be working on my book journal, which I've made in a bullet journal type notebook. I'm actually really excited to be working on this. I started doing a book journal a little over a year ago, but life happens, things get crazy. I thought now would be the perfect time to get it started again. So I do have a couple of pages already done. I actually wanted a place to be able to keep my entire reading journey here. So I started from the beginning of when I started reading again in college, and I worked my way up from there to present day. And I'll have a lot more like personalized spreads or individualized spreads for the current year. I'm working my way up from several years ago and kind of putting in my history of reading, the statistics I do have from when I started using Goodreads. That way I'll have my whole reading journey in one place. Plus that lets me really help fill up this book more, because I hate having journals that are unfinished and stopping and starting journals so many different times just because it's a new year or something. I like to continue in the same journal until it's full. So with that, let's get started.
Okay, starting off here, I'm just going to show you the pages that I've already done before, back when I first started this book. Just wrote my name on the title page. This is an Archer and Olive book, which I absolutely love. Their stationery and their books are really high quality, great page thickness, and really great bullet journal if you are into journaling. I did sort of a cutout on the first page with little bows with the title, Elena's Bookshelf, and some faux flower stickers, which I love. This next page, I have a grid that I use to count out if I want to divide my page into half or a third or a quarter. That way I don't have to keep counting dots every single time I need to divide my page. This is a really quick way for me to reference and know how much I need to make my spaces. I also have my rating system here where I wrote what each star rating means, and I have color coded it, so you will see I do use the same colors to signify 5 verse 4 verse 3 star, etc. And then I have my bookshelves. I used info from Goodreads when I first started using it. I was kind of just getting back into reading, so I hadn't read a ton yet, but I was able to go back in my history and fill those in. I'm going to start off here using a micron pen in the smallest size, a 1, to draw out the bookshelves for the next year. And I'm using this clear ruler to draw my lines because it makes it really easy to see my pencil lines and where I know I want to mark. I also am going in all of the same direction first, and really focusing on pulling straight down towards myself. You'll get a lot straighter lines this way if you pull back from your elbow rather than moving your wrist, which you can see I do move my wrist a little bit here for some of the smaller lines. And then I'll pivot the book and do all of the same straight lines in the other direction. I'll add little curves to the top of the books to give them some character, and use my eraser to get rid of all those pencil lines before I go in with any color. I also have this white ink pen that allows me to really go in and remove those mistakes or details that may have gotten smudged or messed up, and it's just a neat little trick I love to use to make my designs more clean. I love using the Crayola Super Tips for my color. They don't bleed, they last forever. I've had this set of 50 for years, and I have tried a few different felt tip calligraphy pens and really like these ones from Craft & Beyond. It's not a brand that I see used very often, but they've lasted really well, and I really like the sizing between the small, medium, and large, because some of the other calligraphy pens get really huge when you have the medium and large and don't have very usable smaller sizes. For these shelves, I am using my fine liner to go through and add random combination of dots and dashes to kind of give it more of a wood texture. And then I am drawing a vine, but kind of going off the same principles as earlier, drawing towards myself, pulling back towards myself to make my lines neater and easier to draw than pushing the pen away. I'm also a big proponent for doing details with the black pen and then using color to go over it, or doing details on top of the color. I think it makes the drawings really pop a lot more. I use the pink and the purple here for color coding my star ratings, and I will use a little bit of magic here to fill in all of my books from 2023. Since I started off by kind of filling in my history with reading, I am doing the next page as the bookshelf from 2024. But because this is when I really started using Goodreads, I have a lot more information and statistics from my reading back then. Another piece of advice I will say when journaling or doing any sort of crafts like this is I love drawing everything out in pencil first. It makes things so much easier when you already have a plan going in, you're not just winging it, and things can be spaced out well, and it's way easier to make your vision come to life that way. I also know the scrapbooking part of journaling has become really popular recently, but I also really love having journals that are drawn in. It takes me back to my bullet journaling days, and it's so therapeutic to just design and draw spreads myself. So I do like having a good mix of drawings, but also more scrapbook style spreads as well. I love that I was able to go back in and write more of a history of the books that I've read since I became a reader again. I think it's really fun to be able to glance back at these pages and be able to clearly see how I rated the books that I read, when I read each book, because I write both the title and the date that I read each book, and being able to compare year to year, not only volume of books that I read, but also the star ratings, just visually seeing that by the different colors. And there's a lot of pink and purple in this year because I had a lot of 4 and 5 stars. This was the year I read ACOTAR. This is the year I read my first Emily Henry books and some of my other favorite authors. It was just a really fun year for me reading, and I really got back into the zone of making reading a regular habit. Because of that, I remember these books very well, and I am able to choose my favorites from this year of reading. And I made a spread of my top 4 books for 2024. This is where I kind of did a little bit more scrapbooking. I printed out the covers in black and white on my printer and backed them on some pretty floral paper. If you do not have one of these little tape runner things, you are really missing out. It puts double-sided tape and just rolls it right on to whatever you need to tape down and makes it so easy to paste things where you want them. I highly recommend this is an essential tool for me when I'm doing any sort of journal or scrapbook. I also wanted to take a minute to shout out my favorite bullet journal artist that inspired me to begin bullet journaling years and years ago, and is just incredible at the art of journaling and putting together spreads. Her name is Amanda Rach Lee. If you have never watched her on YouTube and you love this sort of content, definitely go give her a watch. She makes so much good bullet journal content and started her own stationery line. She's just incredible. So shout out to Amanda, my inspiration. I also love seeing all the craft girlies making book journals, which I think has become popular just within the past 2 years or so. It gave me a new avenue to pursue this hobby of mine since I had kind of stopped bullet journaling, but I still love the process of doing this. I just didn't need it functionally as a planner. So I love getting to change up my hobbies a little bit and pursue it in a new way and give myself this fun scrapbook style book journal where I can look back at everything I've read and my progress throughout the years as a reader. These flower stickers are so fun and look just like pressed dried flowers in the journal, but I could not find an exact link to the ones that I have. Sorry, I'm not able to link those, but if you just search flower stickers on Amazon or pressed flower stickers, scrapbook stickers, anything like that, you should be able to find something that's very similar. Same thing for a lot of the scrapbook paper that I have. I wasn't able to find exact links for the little mini papers I have, and some of the paper is from the dollar store, so you really just look around. There's a lot of cheap options that you can use to find good scrapbook paper. Now, if you notice my mistake here, the alcohol-based marker that I used for the title earlier actually ended up bleeding through the paper. I normally test my markers, but I did not test this new set of markers before I used them. So learn from my mistakes, always test your pens, but I did come up with a solution for this, and that was to write on a dark sheet of scrapbook paper with my white pen and use that to cover up where that had bled through, and it ended up being really cute scrapbook style for all of my titles. I used my same white pen from earlier, which you do have to be careful with these specific pens because they will smudge, which is great if you mess up, you can just wipe it off, but you do have to be really careful when writing with them. And when I use them for actual writing instead of to fix little mistakes, I do go over them at least twice to make the lines really pop and be way more visible. I did have to wait until these dried before I taped them down, and then was able to move on with the rest of my spread, where I pinned in my statistics that I wanted to keep track of for my reading year. And I actually designed this spread so that I could replicate it between years and be able to flip back and forth and look at how much changed year to year in terms of my reading. Some of my favorite stats that I pointed out were the number of pages I read, the number of books I read, looking at in different formats in terms of by month to month, overall how many books I read at each different size of book, so looking at how many books I read that were between 200 and 300 pages or 400 and 500 pages, and then I tallied up how many books I read that were part of a series or standalone or that were nonfiction. I looked at my average star rating and how many books I had rated at each star. I wrote down my favorites for the year and also created a little pie chart for the different genres that I read. Basically, I just tracked a lot of statistics, and I think it'll be really fun to be able to compare all of these little numbers that you wouldn't necessarily normally think about. From my bar graph, I'm able to tell that my highest reading months were January and October, and my lowest reading months were May and December. I wrote in the month names underneath, so you can see there's 2 bars for each month, one for number of books read and one for number of pages read. Right above that, I have some tallies for types of book read and the number of pages read. As I'm drawing in my average star rating and filling that in, I actually use another technique that I think is beneficial when I'm maybe not the best artist or not the most precise in my drawings, and that is to kind of go back over in my outline and go over it a couple of times to make it more of a sketched look and have the lines not be so exact but have them overlap several times. I think it helps when there's some imperfections, or it makes it look intentionally messed up is the wrong word, but imprecise. And you can see that kind of takes my stars from a little lopsided and wonky to more of a sketched intentional look. I also am using these Muji gel ink pens in color to write in some of the smaller words that I want on this page. And if you have not tried these pens or have not heard of them and you like good stationery, I highly recommend. These pens are so great to write with. They don't really smudge, they write really small because they're in a 0.5 size, and they are highly praised for a good reason. So here's the final spread for that page. I think it turned out really well, and it shows all the info that I wanted it to. Next, I'm doing my 25 for 2025 list that I discussed in my 2025 recap video if you have not seen it. I used this sticker printer that connects to my phone for printing out all of the covers of the books. I printed it out on the pink paper. It comes with pink, white, and green. It prints only black onto the sticker paper, and then you can color it if you would like, but I liked having the pink background for all of the different covers, and I'm putting it together in kind of this scrapbook style for the 2025 list, trimming any overhang that I have on other pages, and I'm using the scraps from those trimmings as other pieces of scrapbook paper to add in, so I'm not wasteful towards any of the paper. I'm going to outline each of the books that I actually did read in 2025 instead of having like a little checklist or box to help me save room, because there are quite a lot of covers here to go through. I am transitioning to more of a pink and blue color scheme for 2025. I think it'll be fun to designate this year in those colors and kind of separate it from years prior. I used those dried flower stickers again in this page to kind of help tie things together throughout the whole book. And I'm also using some of my trimmings from cutting out each of the book covers from the sticker paper as matching scrapbook paper to add to my collage design on the side of the page. And as I'm kind of placing things where I want them to go, I'm not pushing down all the way with each part, so I can pick it up and move it if I need to, or if I like it better in a different place. So that is the 2025 for 2025 spread all finished, and I'm moving on to the actual bookshelf of all the books I read in 2025. So we fully transitioned into that year. Now you see me do this twice already, so it's the same process yet again, going in first with my fine liner for all of the outlines for the books, and then I'll go back in with the same color coordinated based on star rating, and then write the covers and the dates that I read each one on the spines. Because I read so many more books in 2025 than I did in the previous years, these books are a lot smaller, and if I read even more than that this year, I'm probably going to have to move to a double page spread. I do make sure to go ahead and erase all my pencil lines before I go in with color, and you'll be able to see that I did actually have a lot more average ratings this year with 3 stars and 4 stars because I've been a lot more selective about my star ratings than just handing out 4 and 5 stars like I did at first. For the decoration on this page, I tried to draw one of those little blue and white china bowls that are really pretty. I don't know if you can tell if that's what that is, but that's the intent. And here's the beginning of my 2025 spreads. On the next page, I am doing a 2025 series spread. So all of the series that I read in 2025, I wanted to keep track of those and show how I rated each book in the series. And as you can see here on the title itself, I actually messed up. It got a bit carried away drawing those lines, but going back over with that white gel pen, you cannot really tell once I covered it up. Focusing again on that pink and blue theme, I filled in my titles, and then I'm going through and I am actually attempting to draw the titles of each series in the same font that it's written on the book. So I'm going to try and put in a picture of the cover so you can see what I was attempting here, and I think they turned out pretty good, at least for my abilities of what I can do. They're not perfect, but I had fun doing it, and that's what matters. For each of the series, I wrote the book number of the series, and then I went back through and drew my star rating next to each book, so that way I can go back and look at what I thought at each point in the series. I'm using the Muji pen here again for this. You can see just how tiny it writes when it writes those little tiny stars. On the next page, I am going to do definitely more of a scrapbook style. My favorite book from 2025 was The X-Files, and there was a lot of quotes throughout the book that I absolutely loved, to the point where as I was reading, I was annotating, but I also was writing down some of the quotes that really jumped out at me. And I printed out some of my favorites on paper and then bubble cut them and backed them in some floral blues and pinks. And then I'm going back in and using some of my scraps from earlier, I'm creating a scrapbook style spread for these quotes, which I think turned out really well, and I'm really proud of it. And with that, these pages are done. My next 2 pages are both top of 2025. The first page is going to be Book of the Month, where I put my favorite book from each month of the year. And since this was just a few months ago, this was pretty easy for me to pick out which ones were my favorite. I'm going back in first with my clear ruler to know where my lines are, and using my fine liner to draw the outline where I'm going to put each book. And then on the second page, I'm actually doing a book bracket where I narrow down which book is going to be my favorite book of the year, which I already knew my favorite book of the year just because I loved it so much. But I thought it was fun to kind of compare my favorite books from each month. You'll also see I'm doing the same technique here where I'm turning my notebook to match the direction that I want to pull the pen. And I'm giving myself the most space so I'm not dropping my hand off the edge of the book. And even on these slants, I'm doing all of the same direction slant and then turning my book towards the other direction. I'm using this Pilot fountain pen that they came out with fairly recently, I think within the past couple years, to write the names of each month in more of a cursive calligraphy style. And these fountain pens are so good to use without having to buy an expensive traditional style fountain pens. I've done wedding invitations with these pens, and they write really well. They also dry really fast, so you don't have to worry about smudging or smearing. They do need a couple seconds to dry for sure, but it's a lot better than a traditional fountain pen. Anyway, now that I've got all the book titles written in, I'm going to go in with this very large brush pen and write in my title. I am going back in with a smaller brush pen to kind of make those calligraphy lines pop a little bit more by making all of the downstrokes thicker. On my other side, I tried to do the title in boxy block letters like the March Madness bracket logo. And you can see another trick that I do here is I pull back the edge of the paper without creasing the paper itself to write near the edge. And this helps me not have my hand drop awkwardly off the edge of the paper, but be able to write a little bit more consistently. I printed out each of the book covers in color, just on a regular printer, and cut them out, and we're able to put those in. And because they're all different and have such a bright pop, I'm keeping the decor very minimal for this page. I think the books speak for themselves, but I'm sticking to that blue and pink theme. I'm using the same colors to outline what I've already written and to highlight the books that I chose as my favorite throughout the bracket. And then I'm going back and using some of that sticker paper scraps from before, so my scrapbook paper trimmings from the quotes page, and putting them in here to help me save some paper and keep the color theme consistent throughout the journal. I'm going back in to outline my calligraphy in blue and help that pop. And there we have my top books of 2025. Okay, the next page and final spread for this video is going to be my reading statistics for 2025. This video is getting a little bit long, so I'm going to focus on setting up all of my 2026 pages in my next reading journal video. But for now, I'm setting up my reading statistics in the same way that I set up the statistics page for 2024. This way, I can directly compare them by flipping back and forth in my notebook, and I have all of the same stats that I want to track and know exactly how I can set them up. As you can see, I'm doing the pink and blue theme. I'm using a lot of the same scrapbook paper that I used in the quotes page for consistency and also just because they're really fun. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in all of the statistics that I had to track. And you've seen it before, but it's just such a fun process to be able to journal and do it again. And also to see how much the numbers change, because I read so many more books. I had to change the scaling for my graph, and I was a lot more picky with my higher star ratings. So things are a little bit different. You can see here's how the final spread turned out, and we'll head into the final flip through for everything we've done so far.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys really enjoyed it, and we will continue with part 2 as I get into 2026 reading, and hopefully I can update this a lot more frequently this year and have a lot more cool, individualized, specialized spreads. Thanks for watching. See you next time.